Hey y'all, how you doing? This is just a quick little tutorial on how I made some speaker ring templates. So when I go to cut the holes out in the baffle for my subwoofer box, it comes out nice and clean. I'll be using a table saw and a router. If you have a table saw and a jigsaw, you can do the same thing, but you definitely need the table saw. Anyway, enjoy the video. To start, you're going to need to make a jig if you want to cut something round. You can cut round pieces on a table saw. Just takes a little bit of doing. Get yourself a fairly decent scrap piece of wood, and then you want to cut yourself a little piece to fit down in the miter slot. Make sure the edges are nice and square to your blade and your riving knife. That way it sits right up flush on the blade. Of course, you're going to need a scrap piece of wood. I just happen to have a lot of 3/8 ply lying around from an old project that I did, so that's what I'm going to be using to actually make my templates. Next up, once you get your scrap, just kind of cut them down to size. I took my speaker, set it on there, and just kind of gave myself a little reference as to what I'm looking at. You're going to want to take actual measurements though, to make sure that you get the proper cut. So as you can see, after I did my measurements and everything, I mean, where I ended up finding center, what's going to be the center, is obviously off from what my actual cutout is going to be. The cutout diameter for my particular speaker is 7.2 inches. Cut that in half, it is 3.6 inches. So just kind of measure off, and I ended up going with 3 9/16 of an inch. And then you mark the same location on your jig, and then what I do is, you can use a nail or a screw. I prefer to use a screw. You screw all the way through, and then find your mark, make a little indention, and then you'll back your screw out, and then lay your board flush, and then kind of screw it back in. But you don't want to screw it down tight to where you can't turn it or go all the way through to the table saw deck. Now once you get everything all set up, you don't want to just go gnawing off at weird angles. Actually run each square edge through the table saw first. Once you get the bolt cut off, then you'll turn sideways and just kind of hack off your edges. Now you're down to something that kind of starts to resemble a circle. Essentially what you're doing is you just keep turning your scrap piece and just hacking off your edges. Turn, hack it off, turn, hack it off. Keep working your way around. Now once you get most of all the corner edges knocked off, you just slide your jig in, and then you just work it around. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you use a screw, it's going to want to come loose and raise your material some. As you can see, there's some slop in there. So I didn't happen to have any nails on me, and I just wanted to get this done. But if you were to use a nail, it's going to spin a lot easier, and you won't have to go back and raise your screw up, push this down flush again, and then kind of screw it back in. But anyway, there you go. There's your circle. And as you can see, it unscrews itself. So I would recommend a nail if you have it. Doesn't have to be huge, just enough to keep your piece firm and in place where it's at. That way you don't end up with a wonky kind of circle or oval. But there you have it. I had made a template as well that was the outside diameter of my speaker. And if you are going to use a jigsaw, you take your template that was the inside diameter, of course trace it around, and then cut it out with your jigsaw. I used a flush trim router bit that was a 1/2 inch diameter. So I made myself a second template that was a 1/2 inch in diameter smaller. And then I put that on top of the template with the outside diameter of my speaker, and I drilled a 1/2 inch hole And if you're going to do that, make sure that you're nice and tight up against your bottom template or your inside diameter template. That way you can just slide it over. What's nice as well, since you've got 2 screw holes, one in this and one in your main template, you can run a screw up from the bottom to hold everything in place. And then once you get your flush trim bit in place, just turn your router on and just start rotating. And then you're left with a ring that will give you your outside and inside diameter. Now, my measurements were off just a shade, so I had to kind of go through with a Dremel and knock a little bit of material off. But end result is a nice tight trim ring that you can use for your template to cut your speaker holes out in your baffle. There you go. Not too difficult, right? I hope it helped you out. If it did, give it a like. I know I haven't asked for any likes before on any of my other videos, but as I read more on how YouTube works, I guess they have some funky algorithm that, you know, bumps you higher to the top. So if you liked it, give it a like. Maybe go back and like some of my other videos too. That way I can help other people out. Anyway, I hope you all have a fantastic day, and I'll see you on the next video.